Hey, Year 11. Welcome back. Hope you had a nice holiday break. I'm just going to get stuck straight into it. So today or this week you've got 3 lessons to do because there's only 3 days in the week, so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we'll get started with lesson 8. So what you should have out in front of you, just as we would per normal lesson, just trying to keep this as normal as we can. Making sure you've got your syllabus out, your book, your pen, positive attitude, all that good stuff. So today I'm doing these videos a bit differently. I'm sort of sharing my screen with you now, as I feel like I'll be able to interact with it a bit more if I do that. So we're still on our, hopefully you remember what this topic was about. We're looking at personal and social identity. So here we're sort of examining our personality, how that forms, as well as our identity and the different influences that society has on micro, meso, and macro levels in shaping that. Today what we're going to look at is ethnicity and culture and school. Okay, so go to your syllabus. I'll just double check what page they're on for you, because I can't remember. Shame on me, right? So we'll go for a scroll. It's a bit lower. So this is on page 31 of your syllabus. Okay, so you want to be highlighting these bad boys here. Okay, and that falls under this sub-dot point. Okay, but yeah, so they're our, hold on, we're not doing gender, are we? We're doing ethnicity and culture and school. Alright, so highlight that one and that one. Okay. So yeah, we'll get started. So we'll start with school. So again, as normal, get that subheading down and copy this down, and I'll talk you through it. So when we're looking at school and the effect that has on our social identity and our identity formation as well, we can see that obviously this is only a process that influences people at school age. It can have a big impact afterwards, but particularly at the moment when you're going through school, especially through adolescence and your formative years, like I've done here. It's really important throughout this phase, especially because as you're growing up and at different intervals, you sort of, you hear this idea of you go through growth spurts. I think you also go through sort of personal and social identity kind of growth spurts. So around the ages of sort of your senior years, you guys are going to find that you're going to change a lot, and that's going to be based off your role at school, how you're perceived at school differently by your teachers now that you're in senior years, as you guys adopt a bit more responsibility and things like that. Obviously other things are influencing that too, like you're getting older and more mature and those kind of things, but school is definitely having a huge impact on that. Because we take such a, and I've written that here, because we take such a huge role in education, training, discipline, and instilling values into you, that significantly impacts your identity. So when you first go to school around, sort of kindergarten age and things like that, you're learning those really basic kind of values of sharing, putting your hand up when you need to speak, lining up outside the classroom, saying please and thank you, all those sort of basic human behaviours that make you a decent human being. You're sort of learning them in that primary school era, right? When you get to high school, it starts to shape and mould a bit more. You take on a more mature aspect, and we influence and shape your behaviour in that way, and that's a huge part of school. I'll talk a bit more about that in slide 3. But especially when we move to high school now, it's hugely significant because no other time in your life are you going to spend 6 years with such a large group of people. Like you're day in, day out. At this school, you're up to about 700 people every single day. Your year alone's got 200 something people in it, and you had even more when you're at your minor. So the school environment is really socializing you in a way that no other sort of time or period in your life will be able to do that. As you're doing this, to top it off, when you're at school, you're spending time experimenting, exploring, and growing up in what's considered a pretty turbulent period in your life, right? So you share this sort of collective experience, and that doesn't go away. I know even now, me and a lot of my mates are still talking about school and having fond memories there, and some not so fond, but you laugh about it a bit later. It's something even parents still talk about now, and when they've been out of school for 30, 40 years. So it's a hugely important socialization agent, and definitely has a massive impact in influencing your social and personal identity. So that's sort of the DL on school. If we move slides down to 3, I've sort of broken down 3 areas that school impacts you. Okay, so I want you guys to write the bit that I've just highlighted down, and I want you to leave a bit of a gap between each, maybe a line or 2, depending how big your writing is. Probably 2 lines, just to play it safe. And I just sort of want you to answer this question: how does each area influence your identity, based off what I'm still going to tell you now? Okay, so curriculum. How does that influence your identity? When we're looking at curriculum, I'm sort of talking about the official sort of things that we teach you. Like when we look at our syllabus, right? I'm officially teaching you all of this, okay? But at the start of the lesson, what I do most times is I'm teaching you order and discipline and routine and things like that. And that comes under what's called the hidden curriculum. Okay, so things that aren't actually listed on here. No point is there a dot point saying, teach Aidan Crowell how to put his... teach Jasmine how to put her phone away. Okay, there's no dot point in the syllabus on that, even if there might and should be. Sorry, Jasmine, just picking on you there. But that's sort of the difference between the two there, right? There's no syllabus dot point again that's saying you need to speak politely to your teachers and do this and that. All of that's part of the hidden curriculum. So in terms of curriculum, I want you to look at how do you think that area influences your identity? What are the official things that we're teaching you that might influence your identity? I mean, at the moment, I'm literally telling you how things influence your identity. Okay, so that's probably one example there, but try think more broadly. Try think of how other subjects may have influenced you. Let's say, I don't know, if geography could impact your views on the environment, okay, and the importance of conservation or something like that. And that could influence your identity and your beliefs. Again, when we're looking at hidden curriculum, that's sort of the things we teach you that aren't official, like lining up, sitting down when you have assembly, being polite to people, being respectful, all those sorts of value-driven type things that we do. And then there's the extracurricular activities. So these are all the sort of experiences that you receive that are sort of outside the school but still have to do it. So things like school camps, excursions that you may do, any extra leadership activities, sporting teams at school, anything that you take on that's not part of the sort of base curriculum, anything outside your subjects that you might do. Say the Mad Dog volleyball tournament I hosted would fall under that. So I want you to look at how those 3 different areas might influence your identity. Now, it can influence it through things like experience. So maybe the experience of that extracurricular activity helped you bond a stronger social connection with your peers. Okay, that might be an area or an example. All right, so do that. Once you've done that, we'll move to slide 4, looking at ethnicity and culture. So I'm going to separate the 2 down. So we'll start with culture. So you've already got or you should have a concept card on culture. But basically, we know that culture is is the thing that influences our behaviours and practices, and also our perspectives on people. So here I've written it's the distinctive practices and perspectives that a given community of people share that sets them apart from others. It influences things like who we engage with, what we eat, read and listen to. There are also a million other things. So different parts of the world have different distinctive practices or things that they'll do. So if you look at sort of Western cultures on what we value as entertainment, like say for example TV shows, it could be a very different style to another culture. Now, because these go quite hand in hand, when we look at ethnicity, just keep in mind we're not looking at race. Race is the social construct of predetermined or often prejudiced ideas that we place on people based off their things like their skin colour or appearance. Ethnicity is more concerned with things like languages, national origin, so where you are born, the country you're born in, cuisine, so that's types of food you eat, your religions or belief systems, so whatever you follow is very dependent on your culture. That's why different parts of the world often have different belief systems, as well as how you dress and your heritage. So you can tell a lot about where someone's from by how they dress and what they look like, and things like that. What we also need to highlight is that ethnicity and culture have a huge impact in shaping your interests, your choice of place to travel, and your sense of humour. So for interests, that can be things like music, TV shows, those kind of things that you're exposed to in Western culture. If we look at choices of places to travel, a lot of people, depending on where they are, will want to travel to somewhere that's different from their culture. So for example, I did that when I travelled to Africa, and that's because of the culture I was in. I wanted to experience something different. Or people might be the opposite. They might want to experience something the same or similar. And it can also influence your sense of humour. So if we're looking at, say, Australian culture, sarcasm is a huge part of punchlines for our jokes and things like that. Whereas if you went to America and tried out sarcasm, you'd be met with a lot of awkward stares because people tend to take you literally there, and it could get a bit awkward. So what I want you to do now in the next slide is I want you to write the question down. Now you don't have to do all of these. I just want you to pick 5. I want you to look at how Western culture has influenced 5 of these things. So I've just given you a great big list here. I'll turn these into dot points so it doesn't look so intimidating. So I just want you to pick 5 of your own and tell me how you think Western culture has influenced these. So I'll do two in this example. I'll do gender and society for you. So if we look at gender and how Western culture has influenced that, we could look at the fact that our culture is typically more progressive in how it views people and gender. So how that affects someone's identity could be that we're more liberal focused. What I mean by that is we're more freedom focused. So we have this concept of gender that's more fluid, that's less restrictive as other countries, and we're generally more accepting of it because of that influence in our culture. We also see a lot of acceptance of gender diversity in our TV shows, music, and a lot of our popular culture things that we consume. So that definitely is impacted by Western culture. If we look at society, again, Western culture is generally a pretty progressive society in terms of our values, how we view things. Like, we have a democratic government. What I mean by that is we elect them, we get to vote, we have a lot of say in what goes on in our countries, whereas in a lot of other cultures, that's definitely not the case. Our culture believes in freedom of choice and speech, and so we really value a society that's democratic for that reason. Okay, so when you go through, and if you do those 2, you only have to pick 3 more, and just briefly sort of link Western culture in there. What I'm going to do now is, I thought this might be interesting to look at a few different cultural traditions around the world that are a bit out there. Some you may have heard of, some you may not have, just to sort of highlight the huge impact that culture can have on your identity. So this one is a Chinese custom where the husband has to walk over a pile of hot coals with his wife on his back. So he has to do this upon entering his home after they get married, and the idea is that that's going to bring the woman a successful labour and an easy or relatively easy, I don't think the word easy and labour should be together in a sentence, but yeah, that's the idea anyway. This next one you may have heard of. It's spitting on the bride at Greek weddings. So it's sort of seen as a good luck charm that's designed to ward off the devil or evil spirits. So as the bride's walking down the aisle, it's traditional custom to spit on her as she's walking down in order to do that. They also do this at baptisms for babies to sort of, again, try get that idea of warding off evil so that the baby can be nice and healthy. It's also can be sort of done as this sort of superstitious measure to ward off evil during a regular conversation. So let's say, for example, you were to say something to me that I thought might be really evil, rude, or offensive. I might spit at you to sort of encourage the devil within you to get out of your body, because how could you say something so rude and heinous is sort of the concept there. Baby jumping in Spain, this one's quite interesting. So there's a small party in Spain, and this is called El Colacho, and basically there's a certain period of the year where they will line infants up on the street. So you can Google this term here if you want to look at more images, but the idea is that all the men dress up as devils and they jump over the babies, and the idea is that that's going to ward and protect them from evil. Quite interesting. Now this one's a bit gross. It's foot binding in China, or it's called lotus feet. So it's now banned, but before then the idea was that small feet were attractive, and so what would happen is a young girl was growing up, they would rebind their feet. So they would do this manually by almost pushing and crushing and disjoining ligaments and bones so they grow in a certain way. They sort of purposely deform the foot because the idea of a small foot was seen as attractive and desirable. And it was also a sort of gender status power play here, where men didn't want women's feet to be bigger than theirs for a sort of power status trip kind of thing. Next one is bone ash soup. So in Venezuela, when a person of the Yanomami tribe dies, essentially they burn their body. They then mix the ashes into a like bone broth soup, and they all drink part of it. Now the idea there is that that person's soul can find a happy resting place within the body of a local tribe member, and the idea is that their spirit will never die. So it's going to be lived throughout generation to generation, which is, yeah, I've never had bone ash soup personally, but I can't imagine it would taste very good. Spanish bull run. The last one, you've probably all heard of this. Basically in Spain, once a year, they unleash bulls on the street and people run around like silly gooses trying to avoid them. Yeah, pretty cool. This summary task here, what I want you to do, the very last task here, is I want you to tell me if your family has a cultural tradition, and I want you to explain that tradition. It might be as crazy as one of these, or it might not be. And if you can't think of anything, just tell me what a stereotypical Australian cultural tradition is as your summary task. Okay, that's all for this lesson. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the next one.